Right. Hi, everyone. Welcome again to Author Story. I'm Alexander Lim, your host. And for this episode, I'm interviewing Miko Peled, author of the book The General's Son, Journey of an Israeli in Palestine. And for those of you following along who are interested, you can go over now to the Amazon link in the description below the video and check out or get a copy of his book. So, Miko, welcome to Author Story. Thanks very much for being our guest.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Cool. So, Miko, first off, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself in the book? What's your author story?
Well, I was born and raised in Jerusalem,
Mhm.
where I am right now, actually sitting.
Okay.
And as the title of the book suggests, my father was a general, an
Hmm.
Israeli general in the Israeli army.
Hmm.
And so I come from a very patriotic Israeli background.
Hmm.
The second part of the book, so the first part of the book talks about that and growing up as
Right.
Israeli, very proud, very patriotic, and so forth.
Right.
The second part of the book, as the subtitle suggests, is a journey of an Israeli in Palestine. Now, what that means is sometimes not very clear because Israel and Palestine is the exact same place,
Okay.
and it's not a very big country. So, what does it mean as an Israeli to embark on a journey to Palestine? It's a journey from the sphere of the occupier, the sphere of the privileged colonizer,
Mm.
which is what we Israelis are here in Palestine, into the sphere where the Palestinians live. So whereas where we live, it's very safe and very clean, and there's water and paved roads and so on.
Right.
Palestinians have not had the same privileges, don't enjoy the same privileges, and so it was a journey into the sphere of the other,
Hmm.
which is always portrayed as a terrorist and as dangerous and as wild and all kinds of derogatory terms.
Right. Right.
Uh, Realizing that there are all these people who live very near me because Israelis and Palestinians live geographically very close to each other,
Right.
but they're completely segregated and they live in completely different worlds and under different laws and in a completely different environment. So that to me, the journey was more of a discovery that there's such a stark difference that these people who live in a completely different world, even though we're all supposedly living in the same country, in the same state, which is Israel. So that was a journey, and that's basically the two parts of the book, the two parts of the story, and the two parts of my story.
Right. Cool. I got that. So, if I'm not mistaken, one of the most important influences in your life was when I believe it was your niece was killed by a suicide bomber.
That's right.
Mm. And I have to hand it to you. I mean, if someone killed my niece, I would, no kidding, I'd move heaven and earth to make sure that her murder doesn't go unpunished. But for you, you took a different path. You took a different route. How is it that you reacted the way that you did?
Well, the murderer took his life, so because it was a suicide mission. So the people who actually killed her killed themselves in the process, which may be worth a moment of reflection. But the people who I believe were responsible for her death um, are the Israeli government and the Israeli army, and I very strongly believe that they should be charged with murder not only of her but the many thousands and thousands of Palestinians who they have been killing, and many Jews who were Israelis were killed as a result of this conflict. But I think the source of the conflict and the responsible party is precisely the Israeli government, and I believe very strongly that the people in charge need to be put on trial. They need to face a war crimes tribunal, and I do not believe they should get away with it. Although so far they have been getting away with it.
I see. I got that. Now, it's an interesting statement you make that the ones you consider to be responsible for murder are the Israeli government and their members, rather than the those who supported the suicide bomber. In what way are they responsible, in your opinion?
Well, the reality that exists here, where Israeli Jews live as privileged people and the Palestinians live without rights,
Right.
without access to water, without access to freedom, without access to movement, without access to anything,
Right.
They're being killed and arrested by the Israeli government, by the Israeli military on a regular basis. Cruelty under which they live, that is exactly the kind of environment that breeds resistance and breeds violent, these kind of violent attacks. I mean, people don't get up in the morning and do it for no reason. When people are oppressed, they will revolt, they will resist, and many people will opt for this very, very cruel form of violence, violent resistance.
Right.
We've seen it all over the world. The problem is not the resistance. That's a symptom. The problem is the reality under which they live, and the reality under which they live is caused by Israel. The reason Palestinians are living in such dire conditions, the reason they're being killed, the reason they're being arrested is Israel, is because Israel is doing these things. The Israeli government is doing this. So they are ultimately responsible for the fact that there is a resistance, that there is violence. That is hold them responsible. They could change the reality here and create a reality where Israelis and Palestinians live peacefully together.
Right.
But they choose not to. Choose to create a reality where Israelis live as privileged at the expense of Palestinians, and therefore they are responsible.
Okay, I got that. Cool, I got that. Well, okay, Miko. So next, let's talk a little about the book. This is a pretty involved book, and I know it's particularly the first. It's kind of personal for you, but it also has a huge impact. What made you decide to write The General's Son? Was there any particular aha moment, or was this more due to the gradual buildup of your experiences?
It was more the fact that people told me and friends, particularly friends, told me that there was a story and that I should write it. I was already active. I was speaking and so forth a little bit publicly, participating in debates and panels, and a few friends who knew about my story said, there's a story here that needs to be written. You need to write a book. And then I embarked on this, on the journey of writing the book, which is an interesting journey in itself.
Okay. And in what way was it interesting for you?
Well, to begin with, I had no idea how you write a book, so that was interesting to learn how to write a book. But besides that, once you start writing, you don't know how it's going to end up. It never ends up the way you think it's going to end up, because as you write, more things come up, priorities change. Suddenly something that didn't seem important seems important, and vice versa. So, and you start remembering things too, especially when you write a memoir. The more you write, the more you remember. So suddenly, you have a story that perhaps, or parts of the story that you weren't even aware existed. So it was a very, very interesting and to me, a very enjoyable process.
Okay, so you can say perhaps then that you kind of went on a journey as you wrote the book.
Absolutely, yes.
Cool.
And I discovered parts of the journey and remembered parts of my family's history and so forth that I didn't even remember that I knew. I didn't remember that I remembered until I sat down and started writing. And then, of course, it also prompted me to do more research.
Okay.
My father had a military career, and so I had I went into the Israeli Army archives to learn more about the details of his career, things that are not perhaps publicly known. That was an interesting, very interesting journey also into the Israeli Army archives to learn about the details of certain meetings, of how decisions were made, and so forth.
Right. Okay, cool. Interesting. Got that. So let's talk a little bit about the present situation in Israel, Palestine. I primarily get my news from the Western media, and they have a certain way of projecting the people of the Middle East, terrorism, and all that stuff. And I think it does. Personally, I think it's a great injustice for a lot of people affected. As someone who's had close and personal contact with the Palestinians, I mean, you just gave us a sampler of how they live. What is it really like for them to live the way they live? I mean, how difficult, how messy is it over there?
Well, I think I'll answer, but before I answer, I should probably tell you that the best thing to do is perhaps interview a Palestinian writer as well, and they'll give you their own review. And maybe I can give you a couple of names if you want later on.
All right.
Once we're off the tape. But the reality here is that Western colonialism has portrayed, particularly in the Middle East, has portrayed Arabs as violent, irrational, untrustworthy
Hmm.
for more for 100 years now, or at least.
Right.
And the state of Israel is one sample of that. The state of Israel was established by colonizers, by European Jews who decided that they were going to take Palestine and make it their homeland,
Hmm.
because 3,000 years ago, an ancient tribe, the Hebrews, lived here, and the Jews claim that they are the descendants of these ancient tribes.
Hmm.
And a movement was established called the Zionist movement, which, you know, pushed forward that agenda,
Right.
even though the Zionist movement was a completely secular movement. They were not religious, but they said Judaism is not a religion, it's a nationality.
Right.
And the Bible is not a religious text, it is a historical text.
Hmm.
And finally, Palestine is the land of Israel, and therefore we have a right to go there, take the land from the people who live there,
Hmm.
because being Arabs, they're not relevant. White Europeans felt they could take the lands of people who are not white and just do what they want, and that's exactly what they did. So the reality here is really that the Arabs are not the terrorists. The white Europeans are the terrorists. The Jews here, the Israelis, are the terrorists. They have been terrorizing Palestinians, particularly for 7 decades, but actually a little bit before that. The state of Israel was established about 70 years ago, 69 years ago. And they have been the perpetuators of ethnic cleansing, of genocide, and maintaining a regime that is an apartheid regime that prefers your Jews to Arabs, for 7 decades. But somehow, because the narrative is always framed from a Eurocentric perspective,
Right.
the Arabs, of course, are guilty. The oppressed are always guilty for resisting.
Right.
Occupied are always guilty for resisting and for standing up for their rights and so forth.
Right.
The Europeans, this case it's the Jews, the Israeli Jews are the good guys.
Hmm.
See that, when America invades Iraq, suddenly America destroyed Iraq, but the Iraqis are the terrorists, or Afghanistan and so forth, countries that stand up for themselves, the very people who actually fight for their own freedom. If they're fighting a Western power, then they're the terrorists and not the other way around.
Hmm.
So I always say Israeli military, in which I served and my father served for many, many years,
Hmm.
is really nothing but a glorified terrorist organization. And the state of Israel is a rogue state. It's a state that has been committing terrible crimes
Hmm.
for decades now. And the Palestinians have been subjected to ethnic cleansing, which is ongoing. In other words, there was a massive campaign in 1948 where close to 1 million people were forced out of their homes, but the campaign hasn't stopped. Palestinians are still being kicked off their homes. Their homes are being destroyed. Villages are being destroyed. Campaign of genocide, because I believe that what Israel has been doing is tantamount to genocide. And if we look at the the United Nations definition of the crime of genocide, it's almost identical to Israeli actions.
Right.
And maintaining a regime that's an apartheid regime that prefers one people over the other, even though everybody's living under the same government, everybody's ruled by the same government.
Hmm.
Israeli Jews are governed by a kind of a more liberal democracy, and Palestinians live under very racist laws and very brutal military oppression.
Mm.
So that's the reality.
Okay. Cool. I got that. Now, can you just give us an example of, say, an example of apartheid, an apartheid kind of thing that goes on there?
Well, sure. So the way, this is a very small country,
Yes.
and about 12 million people live here. Out of the 12 million people who live here, the majority are Palestinians by a little bit. So there are about 6.1 or 6.2 million Palestinians,
Right.
and slightly less than that, about 5.9 or 6 million Israeli Jews.
Okay.
However, I'll give you a few examples.
Okay.
Palestinian Israeli Jews, like I said, live under a very clear set of pretty much liberal democratic laws.
Hmm.
The Palestinians are governed by laws depending on where they live specifically.
Okay.
So if they live in a certain part of the country, they're considered citizens, but there are about 95 different laws that discriminate against them specifically.
Okay.
Palestinians were citizens, cannot. Anyway, it's a long list of laws.
So yeah,
Palestinians who live in the Palestinians who live in other parts live actually under a military regime, and the laws that govern their lives are military law. But Jews, regardless of where they live, are always governed by the same law. So I could be in a certain part of the country, break the law, and stand next to a Palestinian who breaks the exact same law. The way I'm treated is one way. The way the Palestinian is treated is a completely different way, because we're governed by different sets of laws. Another example, Palestinians, like I said, are the majority of the population, and Israel has a water authority that controls the water distribution in the country.
Okay.
Palestinians are allocated 3% of the water. So the Palestinian towns, because there's big segregation. The segregation is very serious. So there are no mixed towns. Everything is separate. Palestinians are allocated 3% of the water, and the country itself is recognized as belonging to the Jewish people by law. And so the vast majority of the country, the non-Jewish population, which are the Palestinians, cannot lease or buy land.
Okay.
This gives you an idea, and the vast majority of the Palestinians who live here are not citizens. They do not have citizen rights.
I see.
So it's a very, very complicated web of bureaucracy and a web of laws that it would take many hours to describe. But that's kind of the gist of it.
Right. Okay. So it's interesting. I mean, this really, like, from what I understand in my history books, it's kind of like parallels what went on in places like South Africa back at the height of its own apartheid regimes.
Yes, the similarities are very striking. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so I mean, we've covered that the Western media looks at it from a Western white European colonial attitude towards Middle East, Palestinians, Arabs, that sort of thing. Um, I'd like to go a little bit into current events, because I mean, the United States has a new president, Donald Trump, and well, we're starting to see how the way he works. How do you think the U.S. will view the present situation in the Middle East now that Donald Trump's the president?
Well, I think the difference the U.S. has been supporting Israel 110% for a very long time. The previous president just promised Israel before he left office an aid package, which is the largest foreign aid package for any country and probably in the history of the world, $38 billion over 10 years.
Wow.
Which is an increase. It's an increase over the previous aid package, over the previous decade. Now, Israel is a fully developed country. They don't need aid. Israel is not a country that needs foreign aid. It's a fully developed country with a very strong economy. So the first question is, why are they getting foreign aid? Second part of that, previous president also gave Israel more diplomatic blanket support and more weapons than any other president. So Israel is already getting more than any other country and more than it ever dreamed.
Right.
So there's really nothing much more that this new president can give that Israel doesn't already have, except for the attitude. Okay. President Obama had this flair, had this look of a Harvard, with a Harvard law degree and kind of a liberal. But in fact, he was a terrible president in terms of the Palestinians, in terms of human rights, in terms of all kinds of other issues.
Right.
Donald Trump doesn't pretend to be an intellectual. He doesn't pretend to be a liberal. He speaks his mind.
Right.
And in a way, he's more honest, because the policies of the previous administration, and I think the policies of this administration, are going to be very similar. It's just that the previous administration had this very beautiful, very, very, pretty face of Barack Obama. This one has the ugly face of a street gangster, which is what Donald Trump is. He's uneducated, he's rude, he's a misogynist, but he doesn't care.
Right.
So face is different, but I think in terms of the content, when it comes to Palestine, in terms of the essence of the policies, I don't think there's going to be any change.
Okay. All right. I got that. Okay, I got that. So
I'm sorry, I'm just saying I don't think there's going to be any change that's going to come from the United States government. There will be change, but not from them.
All right. Okay, got it. And that's an interesting statistic right there. I mean, you're right. From what I understand, Israel is a fully developed country, economy. It doesn't need aid. It can do well on its own.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead, please.
No, you're right. I mean, he doesn't, and Israel also doesn't need all these weapons because Palestinians have never had an army. Palestinians do not have any. They've never had a tank or a missile or a plane or anything like that. So, and Israel's really not under any military threat. So it's always the question always begs to be asked. So why are they buying? Why do they need all these sophisticated, expensive weapons?
Right, right, right. Good point. Good point. Okay, so Miko, I guess definitely we know by now that things aren't working out over there insofar as peace and coexistence are concerned. So, if I may ask, what is your vision for a peaceful coexistence over there?
I think the model is the model of South Africa, where um, the apartheid regime had to fall, had to be forced to fall in order for a real democracy that allows for equality between black and white South Africans to emerge.
Okay.
And then from that point on, they're able to. Of course, it's going to take a while. South Africa's got a lot of poor people, much more than Palestine does. And then from that moment on, once you have a democracy, once you have equal rights, once you have a government that represents all the people, you can start redressing the injustices.
Mm,
I think the same thing to happen here. I think the people of conscience around the world need to call for the end of the state of Israel as we know it today, the end of this what's called a Zionist regime,
mm,
which gives preferential treatment or exclusive rights to Jews, and replace it with a new regime, which is an a regime that offers equality, that believes in equal rights,
mm,
where Palestinians can vote and have the same, we have equal rights in every way, including voting rights.
right.
Um, then you will have eventually a reality where once the government does represent all the people, then they can start redressing all the issues of injustice, like the water that I mentioned, like the
Right.
fact that there are about 5 million Palestinian refugees,
Right.
result of the ethnic cleansing that Israel won't permit to return.
Mm,
The Israel has thousands of political prisoners, and Israel has maintained a siege, a brutal siege that is causing hunger, and horrible problems. Over 2 million people in the Gaza Strip,
mm,
which is only an hour from where I'm sitting right now, where they have no electricity, no water, and no access to, basic most medicine.
right.
And it's right an hour drive from here. So all of these things will only be redressed once this regime, this apartheid regime, which is what the state of Israel is replaced with a democracy.
Okay, got that. So you mentioned one thing about something for that to happen, which is international people of conscience from all over the world pressuring the regime. Uh, what, in your opinion, are some of the other things that also need to be done for that vision to take place, to become a reality?
Well, probably the most effective thing that's happening, and that all people can, and it's something in which all people can participate, is a campaign which is called the BDS campaign, or Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions.
Hmm.
It's a campaign that emanated from the Palestinians, and many people around the world have embraced, which calls to impose boycott, divestment, and sanctions on the state of Israel until certain conditions are met. And the conditions are quite simple. The conditions are, or quite basic, I should say. The return of the refugees to their homes.
Right.
Like I said, there are about 5 refugees who are living in horrible conditions in refugee camps because Israel has banned them and will not allow them to return.
Right.
Complete equal rights for Palestinians, equal rights for Palestinians and Israelis, and the end of the military regime under which some Palestinians live in some parts of Palestine.
Right.
These are very, very fair and very clear goals, demands. And I think the entire world needs to wake up to this injustice. I think the entire world, I should say, people of conscience. I mean, some people obviously don't care,
Right.
but the people of conscience do care. People need to demand that their government stop doing business with Israel, stop buying things from Israel, stop buying weapons, particularly from Israel, and maintain this boycott, just like they did with South Africa,
Hmm.
until such time that this racist regime falls and can be replaced with a real democracy. So I believe that is the most important thing, and I believe that is the one thing that anybody can take part in this, because it's been done before, and we know how it works.
Right. Okay, I got that. So, Miko, in case any of our listeners right now are interested in supporting your cause, Where and how can they do so?
Well, I would say it's the cause of peace and justice. It's not just my cause, but if they want to follow me and they want to see what I do, my blog, I've got my own site, mikopeled.com.
Hmm.
I'm on Facebook. I'm very active on social media, so Facebook, Twitter. They can follow me. They can come to my lectures, buy the book, invite me to lectures. I mean, there are lots of things they can do, organize events.
Mm.
But if they want to follow and see what I do and learn more about this, then Facebook, Twitter, and my blog, and of course the book are the best things. And then on YouTube, if they search my name
Hmm.
or the General Sun on YouTube, they're going to find my lectures and things that I've done.
Mm. Okay, all right, cool. I got that. So, Miko, let's say you met with someone who's kind of interested in what's presently going on between the Israelis and the Palestinians. He may or may not have complete information about what's going on. He's willing to, keep an open mind about things, and you had only enough time to tell that person one thing about the situation and maybe how it could be improved. What would be that one thing you would tell that person?
That the Palestinian cause and the call for justice and equality in Palestine is the call of the day.
Mm.
That we are all going to be judged by our stance on Palestine, that they should get informed and get on board supporting the cause for the struggle for justice and equality in Palestine,
Mhm.
and that probably the best way to do that is to visit Palestine and then join the BDS call, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions call,
Mhm.
in order to bring about this change. I believe that the peaceful coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians is very possible. It's just not possible under these conditions.
Right.
And so it is not some, utopic, we're not talking about some utopic goal. We're talking about something very specific that can happen and everybody can participate, everybody can contribute. So I'd encourage them to get involved and get informed.
Mm. Okay, cool. I got that. So, if any of our listeners who are interested, words of wisdom right there from Miko Peled. So, Miko, we're winding down the interview. In this last few minutes, are there any words of wisdom you would like to say, to share, or to inspire our listeners?
Um, sure, never give up the fight for justice, never accept oppression, never accept violence as a solution to problems.
Right.
Always seek justice and not be afraid to speak up, speak truth to power. These are some of the basic tenets that have been used by people who fought for justice and sought justice over the world, and they're still true today.
Mm. Okay, cool. I got that. Very, very, very sensible words right there. So, okay, so in closing, the book is The General Son, Journey of an Israeli in Palestine. The author is our guest, Miko Peled, and you can find the book at his website, mikopeled.com, also on justworldbooks.com. That's justworldbooks.com. So, Miko, thank you very much for your time and for being on Author Story. It was definitely very insightful having you with us here today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Cool. So, if any of you listeners want to know more about this interesting topic, please feel free to go ahead and check out The General Sun, which you can do so right now by going to the Amazon link in the description below the video. And if you'd like to follow our author interviews on YouTube, I invite you to subscribe to our channel. So bye for now, everyone, but I'll be back on Author Story next time with another inspiring author.